I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist and your life and relationship strategist. Today's topic is about apologizing. Is it enough? And I can't wait to talk with you about this topic and to take questions and answers from you. I want to talk primarily about two different sides of the apology, whether you're offering it or whether you're receiving it. So let's dive in. Apologizing, is it enough? So we have a habit in this culture of wanting to demand apologies. Meaning when we teach kids that they've done something that we don't like, we want them to apologize to their sibling or to somebody at school or to us for doing something that's unacceptable. Or when somebody in the public does something that's unacceptable, typically somebody will demand an apology. And what I understand about that type of apology is that it's because somebody feels like they've been wronged and they want the apology because they feel like it's a repair. And so is that repair really enough to fix the damage that's been done? Is it the right solution for the problem, in other words? So when an apology is demanded, it leaves the question, is it authentic? And that's the most important thing that I want to put out there today about apologies, is that when they're authentic, meaning when you're connected to the apology, that it comes from a place of wanting to heal the damage. That apology is absolutely enough. And I want to help you a little bit today learn how to accept an apology when it is coming from an authentic place, and how to move on if you're receiving an apology that's not from an authentic place. But if you're connected to the apology, or if the person who's apologizing to you is connected to it, then absolutely that's enough. We get into trouble when we adopt that idea that an apology isn't enough. And there are some concepts that apologizing is meant to be a form of remorse and also an amend, meaning an active way of improving or healing the relationship by actually doing some deed that demonstrates the remorse. And that can be over and above the remorse. However, an authentic apology is indicating, hey, I know I screwed up, and I want to be humble enough to say to you, I know I screwed up. And so that is the kind of thing that I really want to encourage in terms of healing relationships, that you say, thank you for understanding where I'm coming from, and for putting your pride aside, and for apologizing. I'm grateful, and let that be enough. So I see a question in the chat box, and I just want to see what it says. The question is, how do I know if it comes from an authentic place? Thank you so much for asking. So the only way you can know if an apology is coming from an authentic place is when you're doing the apologizing. So if I'm apologizing, the only way I can know it's authentic is if I'm checking in with myself, and if I feel connected to it. If I feel like what I'm offering is true and is honest and is humble. I don't mean humiliating. I mean coming from that place of where I can put my pride aside and I can say I want to be close rather than be right. And that's an authentic apology. When I keep saying an apology, an authentic apology, when it's coming from a heartfelt place. When you're receiving an apology from someone else, or when you're demanding an apology from someone else, there's no way to guarantee that it's authentic. And so you have a couple of choices there. Check in with yourself. What is the reason you want the apology? Do you want to feel understood? Do you want to feel like you're right and that the other person is indicating that you're right? Do you want other people to know that you're right? If those are the reasons you're looking for an apology, those motives aren't really going to help heal the relationship. So keep that in mind. If all you're looking for is to feel right, then by all means take the apology or demand the apology. But typically being right isn't going to create closeness, and it's not going to create healing. Typically it actually creates distance. This need for things to be right or wrong, and for people to validate how we feel or what we believe, that typically comes from a place of insecurity and not from a place of connection. And so when one person is right, that makes someone else wrong, which means that there's automatically a disconnect. So it's hard to be close when we're disconnected. So I hope that answers your question about how can you know if it's authentic. If it doesn't feel authentic coming from the other person, then you get to decide whether or not you want to accept the apology. You can politely say, I appreciate your kind words. I don't really feel like we've resolved the issue. Or you could say, thank you for your kind words, and you could just move on and let it go. A lot of times it can be difficult when we're trying to heal a relationship and we don't feel understood or we don't feel heard. And so then where it comes to apologizing, we have to think, even if I don't believe I'm wrong, or even if the person apologizing doesn't believe they're wrong, how important is it to apologize? It may not be time for an apology yet if you don't truly believe that you did anything that deems an apology. Might not be time. And it might not be time to ask for an apology if the person isn't really ready to shift or work inside of their opinion. So if there's still a lot of tension and if there's still a lot of investment in staying on two different sides of the fence, then it's probably not time for an apology because neither person is going to be very authentic, is my guess. I see a little action in the chat box. Let me just check in. I hear there's a difference between I am sorry and please take my apologies. They're said the first one is assuming the other one forgives them and the second one is asking for forgiveness. Well, let's just work with those two questions, asking for forgiveness and one assuming forgiveness. I'm a big fan of never assuming anything. Just because I apologize to you does not by any means obligate you to accept my apology. And that's part of the problem when we demand apologies, is that in there is also the assumption that the apology needs to be accepted. And the thing about relationships is we all get the freedom to choose. We get the freedom to choose whether or not we want to be a part of the relationship, whether or not we want to heal it, whether or not we agree. And my goal as a relationship strategist is to help you have close and loving relationships that are less conflicted and less judgmental, less critical. And so if you're first demanding an apology and then second somebody's expecting that you forgive them, then we've got two different distortions going on. We can't control what other people think, feel, say, do, or believe. And so if you need someone to forgive you, then that's your work to do, because we can't control whether or not somebody else forgives us. So if you're apologizing and your motive is to get forgiven, I don't know if that's a thing, but if you're looking for forgiveness and that's why you're apologizing, double check your motive there, because it might not be authentic. An authentic motive is to really just from love say I'm sorry regardless of what you get in return. And that's really how love works also, is to just give without expecting anything in return. So check your motive. If you're just looking to be let off the hook or released from your guilt, then an apology isn't the best solution unless you're truly, truly remorseful. I see another comment in the chat box. Let me check it. Is there a way to explain to someone when they've given a non-apology, as in saying, I'm sorry you were offended, as opposed to, I'm sorry that I said something hurtful that offended you? Is there a way to explain to someone when they've given a non-apology? So non-apologies are very common. The most common ones that I hear, especially in my line of work, is I'm sorry for your feelings. Like a couple, let's say, that are in conflict in my office, and they say, I'm sorry you feel that way, or I'm sorry that you're angry. This is a version of a non-apology. It's saying the words, I apologize, but it's not actually connected to an act of apologizing, meaning apologies aren't just words, it's an action. You may not be able to see the action because the action is actually kind of an internal process of experiencing and expressing heartfelt remorse, meaning I truthfully feel like I did something to hurt you and I want to repair that. That's the action, is the repair. So I'm sorry that your feelings got hurt, or I'm sorry that, as the example in the chat box, I'm sorry that you're offended, is a non-apology. So my recommendation as a response to that, maybe to say something like, I'm not quite sure that we're on the same page. I wonder if we could talk through this. Or I'm not quite sure you're hearing me or you understand what it is that I'm saying. Can you explain a little further? Those kinds of responses that leave it open for the person to discuss a little more with you are the thing that's probably going to lead to a repair attempt. If you just critique the apology and say that's not good enough, it's typically the kind of statement that's going to shut someone down and make them feel like, well, you know what? Screw you. I came to you, because for a lot of us, we have to like muster up the courage to apologize. So for a lot of people, just saying I'm sorry can be really an intense feeling inside. So if someone feels like they mustered up the courage to say I'm sorry, and then you say, well, that's not really good enough, you didn't really apologize, it's probably going to lead to a shutdown rather than a connection. So try saying something that's going to draw them out a little further and not be critical. So somebody mentioned in the chat box, I'm sorry, but. Yes, that's a very common saying, I'm sorry, but. And I have a common phrase that I have in response to that. I didn't make it up. This is something I've heard along the way in life, that everything before the but is bullshit. So if you hear someone say, I'm sorry, but, that's a qualifier. But is a qualifier. The word but, and not this one, the other one. And so we know that if you're qualifying your apology, it's not really authentic. So if you're getting an apology that's an I'm sorry but, then definitely ask more questions and get a little more understanding. So we've discussed apologizing today, and the idea, is it enough? And we're looking at it from the perspective of if you're offering the apology versus if you're receiving the apology. And there's several different mechanisms that we're discussing here, whether or not you're offering the apology from an authentic place, whether or not the apology you're receiving is sincere, some methods to creating some dialogue around an apology so you can create more connection, because that's ultimately what an apology in its essence aims to do, is repair damage that's been done in a relationship. There's a comment in the chat box that says, my father trained my siblings and I to say, I'm sorry, I'm a bad girl, whenever we did something that was wrong in his eyes. And that's really common. I was mentioning in the very beginning of the show that we tend to teach children to say, I'm sorry, or I'm bad. And that's really a grown-up's attempt at teaching children to take responsibility for their behavior. That's ultimately what adults are trying to do there. They want kids to take responsibility. The problem is that when kids are really, really young, if they don't understand that concept fully, we're drilling a behavior into them that does not have meaning to it. So then when they get in trouble or they do something wrong, then they automatically say, I'm sorry, but we can't know if they understand the mechanism about the repair attempt inside. So the benefit is to really teach someone about what the meaning of an apology is. And so I can speak to this firsthand. I have a 2-year-old. It's very hard to teach her the mechanism of having remorse for your actions. So we talk more about, you know, if you smacked mommy up the head with your princess wand, that hurt mommy, and mommy has a boo-boo now. Can you kiss it and make it better? Can you say I'm sorry? So maybe combining the apology with an act of kindness, an act of repair, and not just saying, tell mommy you're sorry, because then it kind of loses its meaning. There's a great question in the chat box. Can someone apologize too much? Yes! There is that person out there that we all know that says, I'm sorry after everything, like after they sneeze or after they say something that might be offensive, or if they need to call out sick, or I don't know, whatever it is, right? Anything that they do, they say, I'm sorry. And that is, there's a couple different things about that, right? Number one is it's become habitual for that person, but what they're doing is they're apologizing for who they are without realizing it. The person that habitually apologizes is feeling unworthy, and they just are, the way that they're working with that is by constantly apologizing instead of really recognizing when their behavior is actually causing damage that they're responsible for. So if I sneeze, am I actually causing someone damage, or am I feeling bad that I might have bothered someone? Well, if someone's bothered by me sneezing, guess what? That's their problem, not mine. And so the person who habitually apologizes needs to learn the process of, is my behavior actually hurting someone, or am I just concerned that I'm hurting someone, or am I taking responsibility for someone else's feelings? So thank you so much for that question. That was probably my favorite question of the day. There's another question: is it important to follow apologies with action, changing the behavior, or is it situational? So that's where I was talking earlier about the idea of an apology having an amend built into it, meaning that there's a behavior that goes along, a change in behavior that goes along with it. So if your goal is to heal the relationship, then an amend, meaning an action, is going to go a long way with that person. The thing to know about changing your behavior to match your apology is that the person that's going to help the most is me or you. When you change your behavior, what you're going to be doing is raising your consciousness in life. So if I've said something hurtful to you, and I've been really cruel, and I'm apologizing, then I'm taking responsibility, saying, I know that I did something hurtful, and I want to raise my level of consciousness about when I act that way, and I want to do something different. And so that means I'm going to be consciously working on not being mean, and that's going to improve my quality of life and then translate into my relationships. So I don't know that the behavior change is necessary in the moment for the apology, but it certainly is going to be helpful for a long-term healing of the relationship and a long-term view on self-improvement. Is it possible to apologize without words? And what else? Is there another? I have a friend that apologizes. Yes, okay. So is it possible to apologize without words? Well, that's a good question because it's making me think. In its truest form, probably, but I'm going to go with most people work best when they hear an acknowledgement. So I can change my behavior and I can demonstrate to you that I am humbly remorseful for what I did. But if I don't say it out loud to myself and to you, it's less likely to hit home for myself and for you. I think that when we try to apologize without words, there's a bit of ego that's getting stuck. And so while it might be working towards the solution or towards the healing, it's not as full as it could be. So this is me kind of thinking on the fly. But I think that the best, most robust apology includes words. And there are ways of speaking without talking. You know, we use body language and eye contact and writing to communicate with each other. And so don't get me wrong, those things are all part of the equation. But I think that it's probably really important to check in with yourself. If you're not using words or somebody else isn't using words, what is it that's getting in the way? Let's see. You can apologize by hugging someone. Yes, so that would be one of those nonverbals, right? Body language. And I agree that a hug is a beautiful part of an apology, but I do think that there's more to an apology than just a hug. There might be a silent understanding. My tendency is to want to talk it through and say, do you know that I'm hugging you because I'm sorry? And not just to assume or take for granted that you know what I mean by giving you this hug. And let's see, we have another awesome question in the chat box. Is it possible or important to apologize to yourself? Yes! Okay, two amazing questions today that have absolutely knocked my socks off. So apologizing to ourselves is critical. And that's the same damage we do in our relationships with others when we say mean or hurtful things, we do to ourselves when we're saying hurtful things inside of our thoughts. And so you might not even realize that you're speaking in a hurtful manner to yourself, but anytime you're being dismissive or you're not valuing yourself, or you're literally calling yourself names like, that was dumb, Dawn. Why the F did you do that? If I said that out loud to you, your feelings would be hurt. And so why is it okay for me to say it to myself without apologizing if it wouldn't fly for me to say it to you without apologizing? So keep that in mind, that if you speak to yourself in a tone or you use language with yourself that you wouldn't use with your mother or your client or your spouse, then consider the damage that you're doing to yourself on a daily basis. And that if healing, true healing, means not only apologizing and having remorse, but also changing the behavior, then yes, that's important and is part of the process of self-forgiveness. And so certainly forgiveness certainly starts with that ability to acknowledge first, oh, this is hurtful and I need to let myself off the hook for that. And so it's a great first step towards self-forgiveness, just being able to acknowledge and say, oh, I'm sorry, to myself. Mental note, I need to work on that, or I'd like to work on that. So awesome question. I hope I answered you. You guys have had some amazing questions today, and I love how it's created some great dialogue about apologizing. I'm wondering if there's any other questions that are out there. I think that we've really covered the topic very, very well today. I hope that somewhere in here you have found a new solution for a problem that you might be having. And I want you to know that if you are looking for a therapist in your life, that I would love for you to reach out to me. Even if you're just curious or you want to ask some questions, always feel free to jump on the show at Mondays at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, where I'll be live and taking questions. And if you just like to chat on the side and explore what working with a therapist is like, you can always sign up for a free consult on my website. And it doesn't matter if I'm here and you're there. These days, we have online platforms that are HIPAA compliant for therapy, and so we can bridge that gap and I can come to you wherever you are. So thank you so much for joining me today live and or watching the video after the fact. If this has been helpful for you, please make sure to hit a thumbs up on the video and subscribe to my channel so you can get notifications about awesome new topics that we're going to be discussing. I can tell you the lineup for the next few days. Next week, I'm going to have my mom live on the show with me. We're going to be talking about mothers and daughters. The week after that is going to be burnout, and following that, we're going to discuss gratitude. So an awesome set list for topics, and I look forward to having you on the show. Have a beautiful day.